Welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. The whole world knows by now that Japan was struck by yet another earthquake in the same area in Fukushima that the last earthquake struck us almost 6 years ago. Michael, the reaction of the Japanese government this time was really remarkable.
It was really stunning. It was, first of all, the national broadcaster, NHK, just came on immediately after the earthquake at 5:59, and the announcers were just screaming, get to higher ground. Don't do anything else. If there's someone you know who needs help, help them. And just start, they were just frantic and hysterical.
Right.
But at the same time, suddenly, whoosh, in comes Chief Cabinet Secretary Suga into the Kante, delivers a few comments to waiting reporters, and
this is before 6:20 in the morning.
This is within minutes of this earthquake. The Chief Cabinet Secretary is there at the rostrum, the man who basically runs the country, but is also the nation's major spokesman, and delivering. This is what we have done. These are the issues that need to be handled. Please get yourself to higher ground, and completely in control.
Right.
Of course, let's be fair. In terms of energy released, the earthquake that took place this week was 1,000 times smaller in terms of energy than the one that struck on 3/11.
Thank God.
Thank goodness for that. But tsunami warnings immediately, and get to higher ground.
Right. I was awake. I was having coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning when this earthquake struck. And when we were watching TV, they gave us a warning that said, there is an earthquake, be prepared for aftershocks. And I'm having my coffee, and then the earthquake hit. So they are really on top of this thing.
They are really on top of this thing, and that the government is there, the broadcasters are there, in a way that, okay, you have a bad experience and you learn from it. And this has been a learning experience. Of course, the tsunami that came in was much smaller than predicted, but still, at least in the city of Sendai, it was a meter 40 centimeters.
But they never know this. Even at this stage, they don't know actually when it's going to hit or how bad it's going to be. I mean, the whole time they had the cameras focused on the harbor, and ships were racing out of the harbor, and 10 minutes later you could see the harbor draining.
Right.
And so you knew this is going to be big, this is going to really hurt. But actually, the backwash from the tsunami was not as significant as even 2 meters.
Well, it wasn't, but the thing is that they really have learned. Now, there are still some lessons that need to be learned. There were still cars on the roads visibly, way too late. They should not have been there. And the local administrations are talking about what we have to do to get people to abandon their cars and walk up the hill.
A great practice run.
Yeah, it was a great practice run in that regard.
It could have been so much worse,
What is fascinating for the political people, though, is how quickly Prime Minister Abe got on television from Latin America.
Yes.
It was before the hour was out. He was on, and he was giving instructions about what you should do and what the government is doing. So that it's very clear that the management of natural disasters is a vital part of modern-day politics in Japan. Human security, as they say in the political science biz, that to deal with people's concerns and fears and getting on television, which frankly was not on the minds of the people who were trying to handle the situation in 3/11, or if you go a generation back, the 95 earthquake in Kobe and Awaji, the Hanshin Daishinsai. That earthquake, nobody knew what to do. Nobody was doing anything. Now it's really on the.
The city actually raged in fire for 2 days.
That's right. The SDF were not called out. Here, every bit of all the pieces that should be engaged in terms of disaster relief were working, they were clicking. And that was impressive. Still, one of the pumps went out at Fukushima Daini, not the Daiichi that was destroyed, but the other major complex along the Fukushima coast. So there was that reminder, we have this situation at Fukushima Daiichi of now over 1,000 tanks filled with 800,000 tons of radioactive water that presumably could be knocked out by a massive tsunami, releasing all that into the environment, that this issue of nuclear power and nuclear safety is, again, going to be pushing hard against what the government is trying to do in terms of reactor restarts.
Right. You know, the Vietnamese have actually decided they're not going along with nuclear power.
It's an amazing setback from Mr. Abe and his major he's been calling himself salesman number one.
Right.
And he's been, every time his plane touches down, he either signs a check or he offers a nuclear power plant. I mean, that's a gross simplification, but the number of projects in Turkey, in Northern Europe, all over, every time he goes somewhere, he's either doing something for Mitsubishi Heavy or for Hitachi, or he brings along these representatives and boom. And now these projects that are the lifeblood of the nuclear industry in Japan, because let's face it, nobody's going to want to build a nuclear power plant now, or at least try for at least a decade. So all of this industry is basically frozen in maintenance work. Their projects are disappearing. And this Vietnamese announcement was a real body blow that hasn't yet been absorbed here.
Right. You know, the Prime Minister catches a lot of flack, even on this show. We criticize some of the things that are going on and why we can't get the 3 arrows, even one of the arrows, to kind of really get this economy going again. But nevertheless, for branding purposes, the Japanese seem to be projecting themselves as really, you know, doing government pretty well.
Well, they're doing his government as a major provider or a conduit for doing business. Yeah, sure. And certainly that's been an aspect of the Abe Gaiko, the Abe foreign policy, that he's there not only just to touch down, though he has touched down, I think the count is 65 countries.
He's the most traveled prime minister
ever,
in history, right?
I'm not sure exactly the number that's right now, but it's more than anyone else has ever done. But he's also been always accompanied by some kind of signing of some kind of contract. And even here, when we were talking about the Putin meeting, he had an 8-point economic plan, which Putin's very interested in, whereas he's not interested in the territorial issues. Right. But you know, all of these things, the one good aspect of the Abe project, and a lot of people are noticing this, is been the foreign policy and and that's on both the political and the economic side.
Well, that's a frequent place to run and hide when things aren't going so well internally.
Well, internally, the thing is that I wish that the government would stop being embarrassed that they've not met their targets. It's quite difficult to meet your targets in an environment of global economic readjustment like we're going through. And particularly with the United States economy in stop-start mode, and definitely with China's in a slowdown mode, what are going to be the engines? Well, not Japan with its aging population. Japan was supposed to be the one providing technology to the world. That's the plan. And it wasn't just Abe's plan, it was the plan of the Democratic Party before it, that Japan's going to be the...
Do what you're good at.
Do what we do well. If the rest of the world doesn't want our stuff, then the economic plan sort of falls apart. And
which reflects on the TPP issue.
It reflects on all of the different issues, but the government feels embarrassed, and if not the government, then the Bank of Japan, that it's not met the targets that it said it would. They've started to talk it back, but they should really, I mean, the president's main advisor, Hamada at Yale University, has said, you know, I have to admit, I thought that inflation was purely a monetary phenomenon, that if you just change the monetary policy, inflation would arise. I have to admit, there are other factors.
Yes.
World oil prices going down being the major one. That's, you know, they should, you know, go with that. And they say, look, we have these goals, we've had these arrows, they didn't go the way exactly we went, but gosh darn it, we really did push hard on it, and imagine if we hadn't done anything. That I think is sellable. But then, why sell anything when, as you and I know, when there's no opposition. You know, you don't have to say you're sorry if there's nobody who's going to replace you.
Right. But to his credit, I mean, you've got to look at how many balls are in the air, how many really big issues are confronting the prime minister.
I agree that he is, and that he is working hard on many different aspects of a really shifting landscape. And it's true that maybe domestically everything's gone the way he wanted to, and now we're having some issues on the foreign side. But nevertheless, he has really done an excellent job. He and Suga, let's be fair. You cannot imagine Abe working without Suga. Suga's now been in that position of Chief Cabinet Secretary longer than anyone has ever been. Without it's a two-headed creature. Right. As long as that team is there, we're going to have some kind of smoothness in terms of the sailing. But is there going to be a day of reckoning?
Right.
I don't know.
You know, in terms of global branding, though, not only was the administration quick to respond to the earthquake of 2 days ago.
Sure.
But this story out of Fukuoka, this enormous sinkhole that occurred right in the center of the city and was repaired within 8 days. The cars were traveling, made major news and really shone a positive light on the Japanese, their efficiency, their way to do something of tremendous significance in a very tight schedule.
Well, to quote a certain now somewhat discredited political slogan, yes, we can.
Yes.
In this case, yes, they could. And of course, the world was stunned that, there's a hole and it's gone. They really, and that Japan has the capacity when needed to do amazing things is something that the Abe administration has insisted.
Right.
And that's really to their credit. I mean, they really have spoken very positively about the potential that exists. And that incident in Fukuoka, which was caused by a construction project, the construction of a subway system, the response and ability to completely fill the hole, repave it, put back the same traffic lines that were there before. If the only reason you know anything was different is because some of the paving on the side doesn't quite match, but otherwise you say, no, that couldn't have been the same place, but you know that it is. That's amazing.
Tectonic issues constantly confront Japan. We're watching this closely and reporting them to you. Please stay tuned.